Are we live on YouTube side?
Rishabh, we are live. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just briefly introduce our guest speaker for today, and then we can start with the session. It's a moment of pride and honor for me to introduce an amazing leader from my alma mater, Mr. Abhishek Trigunait, Chief Technology Officer and Principal at ZS. Mr. Trigunait is an engineer by professional training with specialization in computer and information sciences. He is also an alumni of some of the best universities of the world, like the Boston University, MIT, and Harvard University. He has over 24 years of experience working with companies like Microsoft, First American Title, ePharma Solutions, and currently with ZS in the likes of many others, where he has done many hats, starting as a software engineer to heading various verticals for different firms to being the current CTO at ZS, with a special focus on software products. I'm sure this session will guide us in the right direction of taking our first step in the arena of software products for solving business problems. So without taking any more time, I invite Abhishek sir on this virtual stage. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rishabh. I really appreciate the warm welcome and introduction. And before starting, I do hope everyone is safe and healthy along with you, your family, and your close ones. So I do hope the best for all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So the session today, as we all know, is about building software products and business problems. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about. And feel free to put across questions. Again, along the way, we will be happy to take them along. Or if most of them are getting covered in the subsequent slide, we'll try to keep them towards the tail end too for the rest. So can everyone see my screen, please? Anyone, if you can just be affirmative.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. All right. Thank you.
So just one moment for the back. I mean, if anybody has any questions, you can just raise your hand and then we can take it up. Yeah, so we can go ahead now. Thank you.
All right, excellent. So starting off with the organization that I'm privileged to represent, I belong to a company called ZS Associates. We have been in the industry for over 35 plus years, starting off with consulting, getting into operations, and certainly technology all along. And so getting into sort of a larger professional services firm that is serving our clients to take out their products to the market much faster. In the world, we have about 27 offices. We are over 7,200 member people strong, with a little over 1,000 clients that we have been serving. And interestingly, our first client is still our client. We often say that with pride, that we will serve some of the largest companies, and some of the largest companies love to partner with us for some of the toughest challenges. Moving on just a little bit further in terms of how do we bring the expertise that we bring in with a little bit of the tech flavor. Of course, people are our biggest assets. People bringing in the consulting, the technology, the management expertise. A lot of the capabilities that we have created, either it's through the products, through the assets that we have built, through the technologies that we continue to enhance on, and also many of these enablers, the accelerators and the data partnerships and so on that we have built over a period of time. So together as a whole, we bring all of this together to our clients, and that's how our clients love to work with us on an ongoing basis. Just a 30-second pitch about an explanation about the product group that again, I lead within ZS. We have our products which are deployed over 130 plus companies, and some of the largest pharmaceutical companies are using our products globally. It's deployed in over 90 countries. And many times ZS is associated largely with consulting, but software has been part of our DNA ever since the company launched. In fact, our co-founders, when they rolled out the company, it was on basis of a software which was called Maps. Again, this is years before even Google Maps was introduced. At that point, the goal was to leverage the map software to create what is now we call it as strategy design and alignment and so on and so forth. The charter of the group is predominantly to create market differentiation and, of course, continue to bring in revenue through product licenses and productized services. We have millions of dollars which get invested every year on product innovations, with hundreds of team members, predominantly between US and India. And we also have a dedicated software board, which again, we meet every quarter, and I'm fortunate enough to coordinate that. But we have representations from our chairman, from CEO. I, of course, represent as the CTO. We have our business leaders, and we also have external people, like, for example, Amit Walia, who is the CEO of Informatica, sits on the board. We also have Soumitra Datta, who is the ex-dean of SC Johnson Business School at Cornell. And he's also the founding editor of the Global Innovation Index. This is the index which is used to rank countries on innovation that we read every year through WIPO and United Nations and other groups. And then lastly, again, using major capabilities, we are partners with Amazon, but we do have presence both on private and public cloud. We have capabilities in BI with Oracle, Qlik, Tableau, MicroStrategy, anyone that you can think of, we work with them to bring these capabilities to our clients. And then finally, last but not the least, is that we do include these mature practices, whether it's performance engineering, support, agile, all of those coming together to make sure we are a modern product group to serve the needs of our clients. This is just to kind of point out that when we are talking about products from a ZS standpoint, it's not just one product, it's multiple product lines that we have. And within each product line, we have multiple modules or mini products, as if you want to call them. But think of it as individual product lines. And underneath that, you have many of these modules which combine together to form the product lines. Now, coming to the chunk of the session that we have all assembled here today for. Starting off with a good definition of what is product, and I've also included a definition of productized services here as well. But when we are talking about product at a very high level, the core goal is to codify the expertise. Now, the expertise could be a business process, could be a domain, could be an innovation, but the core goal is to codify any of these expertise, and you combine technology and you combine development methodologies, and what you get is a software which at the end of the day is to solve a common business problem and meet the end user's need and to create value. But one of the other definitions which is worth calling out here is that of the productized services. More and more industries, companies are moving in that direction where the services also are getting productized. And when we say productized service, essentially what we are referring to is certain aspects of the service. It could be all of it, certain parts of it, which is getting productized where it can be standardized and automated in a certain way that you don't have to start from scratch every time. You can just do it in a way that it's a part of a product which can then be configured to meet your needs and so on. Now, sometimes the question also comes in, why productize? And that is where, if you look at a little bit of the 5 elements that are worth calling out, the first and foremost is that of value creation. At the end of the day, the goal of any organization which is building product is to create value and deliver value to our end users. One great benefit you get with products, if it's done right, is that it's very scalable when you can get both horizontal and vertical scaling, so that you can scale it not just to one client, not just to a certain use case or a certain volume of a use case, but you can continue to expand as and when the needs arise. Similarly, there's a big aspect of a non-linear revenue. Now, when you provide a service to a user, you only provide it for that engagement. But the benefit you get with a product is that you invest all the money upfront for perhaps for 1 or 2 clients early on. But then when it kicks out and it starts getting adopted, you don't have to start from every single time. You have already built a product, and because you don't have to build this every single time from scratch, it gives you that uplift of that non-linear revenue. And we'll see some examples in the next slide that in terms of non-linear revenue, what I'm saying. But all of this then allows us to create a big impact, assuming that, of course, the product is meeting the needs. And quite often or not, it's also combined with service. The services could be around professional services, installation services, other business services on top of it. But all of those are good examples of how you combine services on top of the product. And finally, more often than not, product is very sticky. When you go in and deploy something within an organization, people just get used to it. That does become the way of operating. And very soon it becomes very integrated into your own business suite and in your own business. So trying to take it out and put something new always has this challenge with migration, data movement, change management, training. So it has a huge sticky aspect because anyone which is asking a product company to move definitely has good genuine reasons to do that. So that sticky factor, it might not be very visible, but from my own experience, I can point out that it's very, very important from a business standpoint. If you look at on the left side, the image that we have, this is talking about market cap of some of these largest tech companies that we have, all the way starting from the Facebooks of the world to Microsoft, to Amazon, to Google, and of course, Apple. If you look at the market cap today, it's a little over $5 trillion. It's not M, not B, but T is what we are talking about. And that is a good example of when you put the power of product, software, technology all together is what you get. Even during these COVID times, you would see that the technology and the software companies have been booming. In fact, Satya Nadella recently made that comment, which I'm sure as techies and business folks, you guys would have already be aware of, that about, he made this comment that about 2 years worth of digital transformation has been achieved in just 2 months. So again, all of that is only possible because of software. There is no way you can humanly scale that kind of volume if you had a people-based business. But yeah, of course, you can do that when you have a software-based business. On the right side, coming back home, even in India, if you look at, there's a great example of what Jio is doing with 152,000 crores. And you can just imagine the number of zeros involved of investment coming in just about like 3 to 4 months. Now, as many of you would imagine, the investment is not coming in only because of this telecom or only because of there's a platform piece and so on. Altogether, they are positioning it as the Geo platform, which is a good combination of software, some physical assets, some of these the collaboration and the partnership that they're trying to bring in, this whole idea of creating the supply chain ecosystem, the e-commerce, all of this together, all powered by software and technology is what is making it all happen. The other big news is where Google claimed to invest about $10 billion into India, and I've put it into a little bit of a red box below, but there were 3 buckets. They said they're going to invest a huge majority of this money in to create access in local Indian languages, which is great to get more and more consumers onto the internet so we get more client base. The second one, which is an important one, is that to build new products for India. And now this topic is about build products. So it's very interesting to me to see how Google is investing billions of dollars in India to see how we can build products for, of course, Indian masses. But I'm sure many of those would just go out into other parts of the world. And then there are other areas like, digitizing businesses, which is for digital transformation, and of course, applying technology and AI to make sure into that areas of education, agriculture, health, so little of the social cause also gets taken care of. But net, the key takeaway from this slide is if you can build the product the right way and combine the power of product, software, and technology, it has a huge multiplier effect. It has a huge nonlinear effect, which I was referring to. Now, going a little deeper, when we are trying to build a new product, what categories do we have in front of us? And typically, I see from again having worked in both startup and large organizations, what I see that there are 3 of these major buckets, and more often than not, people only talk about the right-hand side. Of course, that's a very big chunk, but there are three major buckets as I see that. The first one is that of evolutionary. Now, if you are an established business, established firm, and you already have, let's say, a product line like ZS, let's say, you will always have these scenarios where you're creating major and minor updates. In fact, our Javelin suite is going through a major update right now. But if you look at it, what we are talking about is it's evolution. You are trying to take a product which existed in certain capacity at a certain point, and you're creating a new incarnation of that, which could be miles ahead from what you already had. So again, that's a very good example of thinking a product which is going through an evolutionary phase. You can do a complete rewrite, you can do a minor update, but at the end of the day, it's an evolutionary use case. The second is that of a greenfield bucket, where you have an established firm, but you're trying to create a new product line. So it's a greenfield from that standpoint, that it's a greenfield not for the firm overall, but it's a greenfield initiative where you're launching a new product line. And every single company in the world, I would say the larger established firms, always have these use cases where they do come up with multiple product lines. And that is how you do concepts of portfolio balancing, where you want to have a combination of some product which is in innovation, some of them which are in mature bucket, some of them are becoming which are your cash cows, which eventually will fall off the cliff. But that's how you try to balance your portfolio. And the third one, which we hear a lot about as well, and a very important from an entrepreneurship and the future of where a lot of these disruptive innovations will also come from, is that of the startup, where the product is equal to the firm more often than not. I mean, what you're building is actually your firm. I mean, again, if you have to put all your blood and sweat into it to make sure that the product succeeds so that the firm succeeds as well. And that's how most companies originate. I mean, that's how Microsoft came out. That's how Google came out. So I think they all have started at one point taking that mindset that how do we build something which is very unique, innovative, and then we expand upon that. But when they have become expand, the left two, which is evolutionary and greenfield, become more and more common. And of course, the strategies you would take or the approaches you would take to create products would differ for all three of these. And that's why it's very important to call that out. So from the get-go, you're very clear which bucket you're building your products from. Now, if you go a little further, that now you've decided to build a product and so on, where do you start? Now, the core intent of almost all product firms and product groups is to create competitive advantage for your firm or to create market differentiation to gain a value, which could be, from money multiplier effect, from efficiency gain, operational improvement, and so on. But usually these are the core objectives when you're starting off. But why would you even get into the product business? But then where do you start? And when I say beginning or the end, what I mean is whether you start from the strategy, and I'm talking to MBA folks, so I don't have to teach to all of you, but the idea is how do you think forward and use that, where do you want to play? You want to play in terms of the cost, you want to play in the cost of differentiation, you want to blend the two. And again, there are leaders like, Michael Porter and others who have written, multitude of books and so on. And I'm sure as MBA students, you guys are aware of all of this. But the key takeaway is that this is the think forward strategy. You are thinking much forward ahead to say, what does it mean and how would I play? Interestingly, on the other hand, there are companies like Amazon, and some of you might be aware, some of you not, but Amazon has pioneered this idea, what they call as the moving or working backward strategy, where they start off with what is the ideal customer end state of this product or service that I'm trying to build. They even come up with a mock press release. Typically, if you think about it, when you're building a product, you do all of that. You come up with some charter plan preferably, and then you do a press release to say, yeah, I'm telling the world that I'm ready and here's what they can buy. In case of Amazon, they have created this press release, mock press release to say, this is what I tell the world. And from that point on, can I move back to call out what are the problem statements, what are the current challenges that are being fixed, and what is this that the new product and the solution is going to fix. A pretty neat idea. But again, I'm not saying it's going to work for every single company or every single use case, but something very orthogonal to how typically most other companies do. So again, you got to take a call whether you want to walk forward, you want to big backward, or somewhere in the middle. You can always take a hybrid approach or do both, so you know both sides of the story. Up next is the concept of building product that meet the needs. Now, of course, you've got to start with the business need. Now, it's so much of a cliche that you have to start, but exactly is what you got to do to say what I'm building and who am I building for, what problem it's going to solve. But the other intention of this slide is to show that make sure you don't get blindsided to only look at the business need. You have to validate that with a lot of these user inputs, with a lot of these industry trends, taking at some of these technology evolutions combined all together, and only then you will be able to create something which is going to meet the needs, but also going to create the client and user delight. Now, years ago, you might not have done all that, which is like, build it and they will come. No longer true. You got to build it in a way that it is built for the end users versus build and then people will come and then I'll refine. Now, of course, you'll get opportunity to refine, but you can't start there. And there are a multitude of examples, like, you can take in, of course, I've used this as illustrative because all of these would change depending on which business you are in or what problem statement you're trying to solve. But for example, if your business need is that of operational improvements, just as example, you got to go to the users which are actually using, which are in the nick of the things, which can define how is your operations being done, or what are the configurations module, what are the operational modules, what are the checks you got to put in, are there KPIs you have to measure? All of that are great examples of how you go into user inputs to get all the detail. And then you look at some industry trends. Are there some business trends, concepts like BPaaS, concepts like your agile operations, your Six Sigmas of the world, and so on? Are there trends like that that you want to bring in and learn, and to build something for the future versus just building in what is being done currently? And similarly, you want to look at technology evolution to say, hey, look, this is something relevant to big data, it's something relevant to AI that I want to bring in. All of those together would help you to then form your opinion in terms of what I'm building and how it would meet the needs of our user base. Now, this might seem a little bit of a wordy slide, but we'll spend some time on this one. And if you see on the left side, these are just examples of multiple product frameworks. And if you just Google, I've just given an example of one of the product sites, which has a good sampling of these. The frameworks are dime a dozen. I mean, they're just multitude of framework, and greatly so, because if you read through many of those frameworks, they help you understand at a very abstract level, how does it all come together? How do you ensure that you're thinking about some of these caveats much beforehand versus when things definitely go wrong? So don't, but however, what I wanted to point out was, don't get completely swarmed into the framework only. Keep an open eye. Frameworks are more as guiding principles. They are going to help you structure, they're going to help you provide some guidance, but they're not going to solve it for you. So make sure you don't go after the frameworks as if they will solve your problem. They're not. Of course, they are a little bit of a guiding light versus a recipe for success. Now, coming to the right hand side, and these are a few things that we look at again when we are building product. Of course, you've got to start with the need, but then a critical component is that of the what, who, and the why. What you're building, who are you building it for, and why you are building. So thinking of some of those. And once you've decided that, things like your unique selling proposition, your MVP criteria, your time to market, those also become important. And few of the other things that you definitely want to look in much detail when you are in your early stages of planning and decision making and taking a little bit of that stage gate process is, what is the future vision of your current product or something that you're trying to build? What is the problem, business challenge you're trying to solve? The market segment, the personas, the buyers, the users, and so on and so forth. You definitely want to look at the market size and the growth opportunity, because it's very tricky when you're in a crowded market, and it's also very tricky when you're in a market where trying to create change also is going to have a long tail. And it's not about not doing any of those things or not getting into those areas. It's just about being prepared. So you know what you're getting into from the get-go versus 3 years down the line and you're learning and saying, oh, I never realized it's going to have such a long tail. So do your research and kind of think forward 3 years, 5 years, 2 years, for startup, perhaps even 1 year, to kind of see that what would it look like in all of those scenarios while you're thinking about the market size and the growth opportunity. Of course, you got to make money. So think about how would you monetize, whether it's the revenue aspect to minimizing of the cost and so on. Do a little bit of the ROI analysis, the risk benefit analysis, and so on. Look at what competition is doing. What threats do perhaps you have in the market. Also look at things like what regulations might come in. If a regulation is going to come in and which is going to make your product almost not operate in a way that you had in mind, not just from a feature standpoint, but also from a cost standpoint, you've got to be ready and prepared. A good example is a lot of these localization rules that you're talking about. Now, if you are one of those product companies which were created in a way that your data had to be centralized, otherwise you can't function, and a country like, let's say, India comes with localization laws, now you are stuck. Now, if your product can't work unless all of the data is together, you got to find a way out. Think through some of that. Now, you don't have to build a solution for all of those in the early days itself, but that has to be part of your roadmap as you are trying to create users from that country or that market segment. And similarly, keep an eye on competition. I mean, again, you have to absolutely be ahead of competition if you want to create that sustenance and value prop for your end users. Thinking about solution value prop, again, you've got to convey, you've got to tell the users why they should buy your product versus others, what capabilities that you have which makes it so unique that they would rather want to buy it from you versus anyone else. How can you have partners and suppliers? How do you create these collaboration opportunities to make sure that you're creating dependency, but not so high enough. What are the risks associated with that? Are they helping you to get to the market faster, and so on? What is your go-to-market strategy? What is your strategy in terms of how you're going to sell, how you're going to market, how are you going to combine it with services? All of those together have to be combined as your go-to-market strategy. And then what key activities asks that you have? How many people would I need? Do I have the money? Whether it's asking your VC or pitching it to VCs or asking to your boards. At the end of the day, you got to go to a larger group to validate a lot of those ideas and asks to make sure you're on the right track. And how do you also create a little bit of these decision gates so that it's not about stopping the product or project at that point, which could be an extreme case as well, but also to take some actions. Am I moving on the right track? Are the changes we are bringing in, the product features we are bringing in, are going to make sense to the market when it gets there? Things of that nature. And then finally, a little bit on this future technology trends. Now, this is a very important one in today's time, especially because the technology is changing so rapidly, so dramatically, that you have to keep an eye on these technology changes. Otherwise, you'll be out of business right away. The concepts of digital transformation and these larger tech companies, the way they are coming up with innovations, what used to take years before is now happening in months and sometimes even in weeks, is what we are noticing. So just keep an eye and make sure you do it in an agile way, that you're ready to adapt these changes, because that's how you'll be able to stay ahead of competition and create a good value prop for your products. So I know I spent quite a bit of time, but hopefully I feel that this was helpful because there are many frameworks, but we wanted to kind of point out that many of those frameworks nudge you towards a lot of these similar concepts and ideas. You don't have to take all of them and boil the ocean. Of course, as long as you're starting with the first top 3 or 4, that is where you want to start with, but the others will come along as you mature into your development processes. But now that you have thought of the product development process, some of these frameworks and so on, just look at it in terms of the overall flow and how it sort of comes together. And this is how we are looking at it at ZS as well. But the idea is that you first explore the market. You go ahead and look at what's going on, what is the market, the customer landscape, the business needs, what are the customer asks, perhaps what the competition might be doing, and all of those. So just doing exploration. At this stage, you have not decided that I have a team ready to go, all this, what I'm building, and so on. It's exploring. And then after that exploration, you try to do a little bit of this definition, where you're trying to go into a little bit of these funneling of these exploratory ideas to then finally decide that, oh, this is the sweet spot. I think this is where my product should sort of play in. And of course, you validate that a little bit with your technical approach as well, so that what you're trying to put in as your sweet spot, it shouldn't be completely unachievable as well. I'm meaning an example, but let's say it's going to require the power of quantum computers and so on. That itself is sometimes where it's going to be so cost prohibitive that might not be the best time to do that. So think of it that what it means that you have learned from the market, what it means in terms of the definition. And now that you have a definition, let's spend some time in terms of validating that. This is where you can do a lot of these user researches as well to validate that, hey, this is what you're thinking, is this how it should work? Both the business side, the user experience side, the technical side, you're trying to validate a lot of that to make sure the definition is hopefully going to meet the reality, and this is a good time to validate. And once you have done all of that, now you know what you're building, what will meet the business needs, and now you have a little bit of your marching orders in a way, and then you go into building. And what we recommend is to use agile processes and of course breaking into the concept of sprints and releases and so on. We'll see a little bit of double click of that as well. But you go into that build mode, and then you go into the launch mode. And when you are in the launch mode, you have rolled it out to the client. You also need to ensure that you are ready to make very rapid tweaks as well. Because when the rubber hits the road, there's always this possibility that what you built and when the real use cases are coming in, there might be some slight tweaks required. Now, hopefully you have done your explore, define, validate, and build in a very rigorous way that when you do the launch, you don't have to worry about it as much. But you always have to be open to make some of those adjustments when this meets the real world. And once it's live, clients are using it, you've got to continue to operate it. There'll always be new changes, new feature additions. There'll always be new configuration requests, hot fixes, upgrades. all of that together is what constitutes the operate. And also the infrastructure elements are also a very important one to call out as part of the operate. Concepts of disaster recovery, your concepts of uptime, all of those also become very important, because if your clients are going to rely on you, you got to ensure your infrastructure is at the position that you can rely on. So just a little bit of a flow of the product ideation, how it should work across many of these stages. Now, what are the various teams you might need to succeed? Now, I must also point out a lot of these would also depend and how crazy you get in terms of formally structuring all of these groups, or maybe one or two people doing a lot of these, is at what stage of the product life cycle, or I should say company life cycle you are in. If it's a startup, I get it. That you won't be able to do all of that. If you're a mid-tier firm, you'll have most of them, if not all. If you're a large shop, you've got to have all of these. So take it with a little bit of that pinch of salt. That I'm not recommending that every single one of you will who is working on the product team will always require that. But as you mature, you of course want to nudge in that direction to have many of these mature groups. All the way from product management and user experience, which I often refer to as our eyes and ears, which are meeting the market needs, talking to our clients and users, figuring out what the asks are. And of course, there's a huge sort of architecture engineering team. And most cases for product group, that is one of the largest group, which plays a little bit that sheet anchor role to continue to deliver and create some of these innovations and codify the expertise that we talked about earlier that our product management and UX is bringing in. And then you have groups like test, QA, your PSR, which is a performance, security, reliability engineering, security from an external security standpoint as well. And security needs special attention, particularly in today's time. More often than not, what I've seen is, and I might also talk to other industry members and in some other forums as well outside my current organization, is what I've seen, that security oftentimes gets slightly overlooked. So make sure you don't let your guards down on security. This whole concept of DevSecOps is something very critical, especially as you scale. Security can make and break your product. But then all these mature functions together, which help you to create the offering end to end. But then once you have the offering, you do need the marketing and the software team to sell. Now, many of these can be further broken into other groups, concepts of pre-sales, concepts of your demo and the sales, the sales setup teams, and your sales architects of the world, your sales engineers of the world, and so on. Similarly, within marketing as well, you have the concepts of growth marketing, your concepts of your digital marketing, your face-to-face marketing, and so on and so forth. So again, there are many of these examples as well, and further groupings of these functions. And then when you go into the deploy and support, this is where once you have a product, you do need a function which can very easily deploy. Your concepts of DevOps, concepts of release engineering, concepts of software as a service, disaster recovery, all of that is what gets into that bucket. And then you do need a technical support and a licensing team to make sure you're able to license things appropriately, but also a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 team to help you support the organization. And all of this could be binded together with agile methodologies. So you do need a team, whether you call them as like how we refer to in our organization as agile coaches and managers and associates for agile methodologies. But you do need a group which is sort of experts in agile as well to put this all together. I would reiterate that you don't need all of these functions on day zero when you're especially working in a startup, but you do need to have this mindset that, oh, I'm seeing a gap in this. Can one person play the same role or bring some of these functions in a shared way? Or is there somebody I need to bring in from outside? But as you mature more and more into the SMB to MSME and also getting into the large organizations, you absolutely need to nudge in this direction. This is again a quick glimpse of how we do again at ZS when we are looking at our products. We look at again top to bottom, looking at the software solution, product vision, typically 2 to 3 years out. There were days when we would do it 5 years out, no longer true with the kind of market pressure we see and the competitive pressure we see. You do then decide to a year roadmap where you would go in to then define what exactly you're going to deliver in a year. And then you start breaking them into release plan, which could be, we try to recommend quarterly, but then you go into much detail to say, this is what I'm going to deliver by the end of this quarter. And then further, you break it into sprints and daily, daily meetings through scrums and so on, to then put this all together to make sure that you're taking sizable chunks. That's the concept of agile. And then you try to iteratively develop and be agile along the way to make sure you meet the needs in time. But that's a good way to kind of look at it, a little bit of the layers of the onion, how all of this kind of comes together from vision into sort of a daily plan.
Sir, I just have a small doubt on this.
Please.
So, yeah. So when you say that there could be a 1 year long roadmap planned for the product, and let's say we have our competitors who have brought in who have come up with a feature or an update that could potentially take the market by storm and really make a big difference for us. So, and that is something that was probably similar to that was there in the roadmap, but for a long-term vision and not somewhere in the 1 or 2 year perspective. So, how does a product team adjust to that, wherein the product, our competitors could have a strategic advantage over us, and then so how do we adjust in those situations?
No, very
and how
good
do we adjust
question.
our product roadmap?
Very good question, Rishabh. Very nice. So the way it works is there's this concept of, and different companies can use different name, but there's a concept of sensing. So you do put in your competition sensing, which we often refer to as CI, which is competitive intelligence sensing. You have your tech sensing combined together. You look at, how is that, going back to my previous slides earlier as well, that you look at how industry is evolving, which includes competition as well. You look at how technology might be evolving, and all of that combined together, which gives you a little bit of the nudge to say, yeah, you got to adjust your roadmap. But typically, every single company on the planet, when they see a roadmap, you will see somewhere written in a very tiny little bit asterisk somewhere saying the roadmap is subject to change. That's precisely why it is for. And that is when you go into your quarterly releases, is when you kind of point out to say, this is what I'm going to deliver in my release. And that is where I'm going to account for some of those nuances that you just talked about. That it's an annual roadmap, but every quarter when I'm going to this release, what is my sensing, my CI and my tech sensing teams telling me? And based on that, how we evolve the plan and be agile in a way to say that, yeah, this is what we're going to change. And honestly speaking, even within a release, it's not, I mean, again, we always want it to be locked, but of course there are opportunities and there are always situations where in the name of agile, you have to go back and make some changes. Now, of course, you don't want to make it a complete wild west where nobody knows what you'll be delivering. So think of it more as at the year level, you're directionally aligned. What do you want to make? We want to agree on. At a quarter level, you're almost aligned that this is exactly what we are going to deliver. But along all of these dimensions or these timelines, can we make changes? 100% yes. Because at the end of the day, there is no point in delivering something which I know is not going to provide the best value. So you've got to be agile along the way, but that's how most companies do to answer questions. Look at the roadmap based on CI/CD, change some of your roadmap goals as you get into the release plans. And of course, you do this planning or this yearly roadmap. It's not that you do it yearly once and then leave a complete vacuum. Of course not. It's a little bit like a rolling quarter kind of plan that you want to come up with in an ideal way so that you can absorb for some of the competitive and industry changes. Did that answer, Rishabh?
Yeah, pretty much.
All right, excellent. Okay, moving on, going a little bit of a double click on the agile, what we saw. But agile, if you think at a very high level, what we are talking about is that, once you have aligned what you want to build, then you definitely do a preparation, which is talking all about your backlogs and groomings and design sessions and so on, creating your sprint plans, and then finally getting into this idea of execution. And you can use multitude of these standards, the concept of SAFe, which we have shown, and the concept of Scale Agile, which we are trying to implement ourselves as well. And by that, I mean the newer version of Scale Agile. We've always been referring to SAFe. But the idea here is that you use many of these frameworks to get into this little bit of the rhythm of alignment, preparation, execution, and of course, delivering it out. Now, what you see here on top, right-hand side top corner up here is a little bit of a glimpse of milestones that we have. So all of this might seem very simple, just with, when you are showing at a very high level. But when you go into very nuanced details, and I purposefully kept the image fairly small because the intention was not to spend too much time, which is a topic in itself, but to say, how do you do delivering or your products so that you're not delivering just for one release, but you're thinking about 2 releases ahead. Not the entire team, but some members, particularly like, let's say, product management, business, some business leaders, how are we thinking about 2 releases ahead? While some of the senior members are trying to structure the next release, while the core team is still working on 2 releases back. So think of it as n plus 1, n plus 2, or you can say n minus 1, n plus 1, n plus 2 in a way. But the idea is to plan forward. The idea is to be more proactive than reactive and do it in a very iterative and agile way so that it becomes a very well-oiled machine. And there are, as I said, safe and lean and so on. There are many, many examples out there that you just have to leverage. Extreme programming being other one, which many startups kind of follow as well. Less is other one. So you just have to identify which one works for you and just pick one. But I can't say enough that Agile is the only way to go. If I have to point it out, that do adopt some version of Agile. I often, again, use this term called Magile, which is modified Agile, that you can easily modify your Agile practices to make sure it meets your needs. But you do have to adopt Agile in today's world to make sure you are able to be nimble and also deliver changes in time. So now that we have talked about the business need, how do you go about defining all of that? We went into a little bit of forming the teams. We went into a little bit of the process as well through Agile. Now coming into a little bit of the how part as well, which is where technology and architecture play a very, very big role. Some key takeaways here. There are a bunch of these cloud platforms. My recommendation would be leverage that and the open source system and not try to create something of your own unless you're trying to create a product which is going to replace some components of this. Because there's already something existing. Why would you spend time trying to recreate everything from scratch versus trying to leverage what exists? I often see both startups and larger organizations getting into this trap to say, oh, but my scenario is different. Yeah, I get it. But maybe you don't want to use what is there as is. Have you looked at other alternatives? Have you looked at how they have broken it down? So you're going to use 80% of the feature and you're going to bring only 20%. You're building only 20% versus building everything on top of it. Now, there's a big exception, of course. Like, for example, if you are trying to build a product, let's say to monitor, and there are a bunch of these log management systems as well and so on. I'm again just using as an example. Now, if your product itself is to get into that market space, of course you'll be building a little bit of that from scratch. But there also, can you use some of these building blocks either from open source or this cloud provider? The answer is yes. But if you're building, let's say, end business applications, there's no reason why you would write code to say how would my logging work in a product ecosystem, or how would my exception handling work and so on. I mean, those problems have already been solved. Leverage what exists versus trying to recreate it all. On the right side, I've just given a little bit of illustrative architecture, which most modern product companies follow. And this is just an illustration of how it could look like in various layers. Like your cloud platform, going into your data layer, going into your microservices layer, the business components, which is a combination of many of these microservices, and then going into the products. And then there's another layer on top, how you bundle many of these products to provide services and so on. Not every company has to follow this. As I said, this is just an illustrative architecture, but most modern companies, larger companies, I would say, have followed or are following usually this kind of ecosystem or stack to get to the most modern products. And of course, you do need some agile processes, standards, compliance, SOPs, all to kind of put it together so that everybody is following similar ground rules. Now, no talk would be complete if you don't talk about AI. So of course, in products as well, AI has a very important role to play. But I can't say again enough from my own expertise and my experience that don't get swayed by AI. First, find out what role would AI play in your business and in your product. And then decide what version of AI would make the best fit. You'll definitely hear chatter about NLP, NLG, predictive analytics, deep learning. All these are important, no question. But is it relevant to the product that you're trying to build? You can still embed AI by using concepts of expert system, concepts of chatbot, robotic process automation, knowledge graphs. All of these are good example of incremental AI, and you don't even need to go to all the concepts of your supervised learning and the predictive learning and your NLP-based applications, your image and vision. So stay away from the CNNs, the RNNs, your GAs of the world, unless you absolutely have a use case to do it. So that is the key point I want to make. AI has a very important role to play, but don't get swayed by AI if it's not going to add direct value to your product, especially the disruptive ones. because they do come with their own baggage in terms of the amount of work it's required to set them up, the amount of work that's required to generalize many of those AI, to productize many of those AI, to monitor many of those AI. It's a topic in itself. I've done some sessions which are also on YouTube if you guys are interested. But take a look in terms of how do you go about defining which version of AI you'll implement as part of your product. But AI is definitely here to stay, is going to be an important element. Of course, consider it, but in the spectrum, where do you want to play? Make sure you define that. Now that we have talked about a little bit of the tech as well in the journey we talked about, of course, KPIs and business metrics are important because at the end of the day, we are in the business of building software for the business more often than not. So you got to think about what KPIs to measure. But before I go into the details of these, a lot of these KPIs that I'm putting here are directional, but they are not complete by any means, not comprehensive by any means. And also a lot of these would depend on whether you are a startup ecosystem, an SMB, or a mature business. So take it with a grain of salt, but the intent is to sort of carve out that these are the major buckets that you predominantly want to think through. The first one on business side is that of economics. At the end of the day, we all are in the business to make money with these products or some other value addition. So you got to define what that value addition that you're trying to create. From economic standpoint, it becomes your revenue per customer, the concept of average revenue per user. You can do it at a monthly level, you can do it at a yearly level, and so on. What is the cost of customer acquisition? What is the expense revenue ratio? All these would help you define how do you stay ahead of the curve in terms of economics, and whether you have to go back to your board to represent the data, as I do many times, or you are going to the VCs to kind of ask for more money or to even sell your business. These are all the questions they are also going to ask. The second is that of scale, that how do you scale your product? In case of a software product, scale is a big factor. If you only have one client, then it is not a product, it becomes more as a project. You have all the intentions to scale. And by scaling, you don't want to stop just at 1, 2, 3, 5. You want to scale to many, because that's how you'll be able to gain that non-linear revenue aspect that we're talking about. But concepts of users, revenue, growth ratios, the churn ratios, the pipeline, all these are good examples of how you talk about scale. Now, typically companies would look at a good combination of economics and scale. Now, in many cases, if you have a new product, which could be for startup as well, particularly in B2C, many times you would hear that they discount the economics for some time to take care of scale, which is okay, but you have to keep that somewhere in your back pockets, that somebody is measuring that, even if you are not sharing that, because that's a strategy. Because there the idea is that you want to gain the scale, you want to gain the market share, and then slowly you want to gain the economics and gain the revenue and the profits. But the reason to call that out is depending on what stage of the journey your organization or your product is, you might want to have a balance between economics and scale and tilting between those two. The third big one is that of usage, that how is your product getting used? Concept of NPS, number of users, transactions, feature usage, and there are a lot of products which also help you measure some of these as well. But these are all helping you to point out that what we have built is going to meet the business needs. Similarly, on the development side, you want to call out that what you're building are innovations. These are all innovative features. So how many net new innovations you're delivering? How many clients are actually adopting it? If what you built is so good, why are clients not adopting it? What are the challenges they might be facing in terms of setup and migration? All are the things you got to call out when you're thinking of building these products. Similarly, getting into delivery, how many times you're doing on-time releases, your team velocity, the percentage of configuration versus every time somebody has to customize versus configure, then it's not a great product. So you got to think through a lot of those aspects as well. And then finally, the quality of service in terms of defect densities, your time to resolution in terms of mean time to resolution for your technical support, your system uptime. All these are important criteria that you've got to keep in mind while you're thinking of the overall software business. And I have not included many more. For example, there's a portfolio level matrices as well. There are operational level matrices as well. There are infra level, more nuanced infra level matrices as well. The intent was just to give a little bit of a sampling of sort. But these two buckets are the most important one, particularly when you're building a new product. And the key takeaway from this slide I would recommend that you guys have is that you want to measure, you want to refine the matrices, and after refinement, you want to adapt and measure again. So think of it as an iterative cycle, which is going on and on and on, right from when the product has started to when the product reaches it, like, a little bit like an on ice, and finally, like, when you try to push it out of a formal production cycle and so on. But the idea is that across that entire life cycle of the product, its KPIs would continue to change, and also in terms of the organization that the product is linked to.
Excuse me, sir. Sorry to interrupt you. Apurv has a question. So, Apurv, you can go ahead and put your query.
Thank you, Rishab. Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So I had a question regarding software economics. So I was reading about it, and I felt that a lot of times when we are costing, when we are assigning a value to our software product, then that costing part is not done accurately, and a lot of the revenues, profit margins, everything depends on the right valuation of the software. So I wanted to know if there is a generalized framework or some tool that is available which optimize the right costing of a software.
Yeah, no, very good question, Apur. Again, a very, very important one as well. When we are building these software, particularly the new one, there's a huge ecosystem in itself when it comes to software pricing. But at a very high level, the things that you sort of look at. First and foremost, you got to look at that what is the value add you're providing, and what could market sustain from a cost standpoint for that value. Now, I might think I've created the best thing since sliced bread, but if the market is not ready to accept it, of course, the cost and the acceptance ratio is not meeting at all. So that's the biggest one that you have to first define. But what I've built, what is the value add that I'm creating, and what is the market ready to pay for it? So that's the first thing you got to at least have in mind, because I could say I'm just making it up, but let's say it's $100 license per month per user, and if the business is saying that, oh, my business itself that I'm going to get for this part of the software that is getting used is probably $75. There's no way I'm going to give you $100. So sort of doing a little bit of that sizing to say that what is the value add, and trying to quantifying that value, that how do we measure that. But then other things to look at is competition, that how is competition trying to put across their products, and that gives you a little bit of an understanding of what is market ready to pay for something similar like that. So that's other big one, that the competitive part that you look at. The third thing you also look at is that how do you get into a little bit of a pricing evolution, which is that I have my existing client where I might have to grandfather some of this pricing. Should I go ahead with discounts? Should I honor my existing contracts and so on? Whereas you look at some of your newer clients, is there an approach that I want to take where I want to give them, like, I'm making it up, but let's say 75% discount in year 1, 50% in year 2, and then of course no discount in year 3 onwards and so on. So the point I'm making is a lot of this depends, and pricing is both an art and a science, and sort of as I said earlier, that has an ecosystem of its own and a channel of its own when you're looking at a product, and a dedicated topic in itself. But these are the few things you predominantly look at. But the core goal is to say the product, the price that I'm trying to come up with, is the market going to sustain that or not? And if yes, why? Because the value definition is where it becomes very important. If I'm creating a value that the client is ready to pay twice that amount, then maybe I'm underpricing my product. That means I need to increase the price. Similarly, if I might be thinking that this is the best one, and the client is saying, yeah, I've heard about 5 other vendors pitching me this, immediately you get the impression that, oh, either I need to convey the value add differently, or I need to go back to the drawing table to see that, what else value add I need to create to sustain that pricing, or change the pricing. You've got to come down then. So those are the few things: competition, market reaction, your value, value in the value pricing and so on, the value definition, that what kind of value is, and how do you quantify that value definition. And finally, again, being a little bit of the agility in terms of being agile with your existing customers, with your new customers, with your prospects customers, perhaps getting into other industries as well. Does that help, Apur?
Yes, sir, pretty much. Thank you very much.
And there are frameworks, by the way. So there are some frameworks as well for pricing. Again, if you're interested, I'm happy to share online, or if you just want to Google it out, there are a bunch of these pricing frameworks. A lot also depends on the type of product that you're building as well. Some products are very transaction heavy. Some are enterprise kind of software where you just pay once and then unlimited users can just access it. Some of them are SaaS, some of them are enterprise. So as I said, pricing is a whole discipline in itself, has its own ecosystem, as a topic in itself. But yeah, if you're interested, I'll definitely highly encourage you to take a look.
We have one question from our YouTube audience. So I'll just read it out to you and you could answer that. So the question is, sometimes we find that to exploit the first mover advantage, companies try to come up with new products or features which is not fully developed and thus having a lot of issues and thus not user friendly. So how do we balance between releasing a product as quickly as possible while also thinking about releasing a fully developed and user friendly product?
Yeah. So the short answer to that is, if anybody knew that answer, would be a billionaire, and that would be the only company on the planet, I would say. But jokes apart, of course, this is a problem as leaders we all face. We all face every single time, and I'm talking about even companies like Google's and the Microsofts of the world, and to the startups. The way to kind of do it is the agility part that I kind of brought about. All the things that I talked about so far is how you do your best. How do you come up with your best case scenario so that what you're putting out is going to meet the market needs? That's exactly what we just talked about all this time. Doing all the way from market research to doing these user interviews, to doing these validation exercise, to looking at industry competitive trends and so on. Essentially, the intent and the attempt is that through getting all that research done, you know what we are building, through all the maturity and the groups and the agility that we talked about and agile processes, the how part is mature enough that when both of them combine together and when you do the launch, you are in a position where many of those questions that you're bringing up, whether it is the best product or not, and so on, is going to be met. And that is where I also pointed out that even after the launch, you got to be very, very agile, because honestly speaking, there is no secret sauce to say, oh, you do this 5 thing, tick, 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 and now what you have built out, it's going to meet everyone's need. I wish there was a recipe like that. But you do your best case judgment. And as long as you're doing the definition, the validation, the development, the launch in a very structured way, more often than not, you get it right. Of course, you still have to be agile and continue to refine and revamp. Now, to answer your question also in terms of time to market in particular, that is a little bit of an art as well. To say that if you have some competitive information about how your competition is doing, that's a whole different story. But beyond that is a little bit of an art to say, if releasing it with bugs a week before or releasing it with more structure and more stability 2 weeks down the road, which is important, I would always choose the latter, to be very, very honest. Except, as I said, otherwise, if you have a $5 million deal sitting on the table that you have to let go, that's a whole different story altogether. But if you don't have any crunches like competitive pressure or client pressure like that, then I would always recommend that go for stability and so on. But do identify which are the features which are most commonly used versus worrying and getting in that trap of looking at every single feature being mature. You can't. And even after launches, does Google and Microsoft get bugs? Answer is yes, 100% yes. But if that bug is 60% of your next release versus just being 6 of those perhaps, then you are in trouble if you're in 60%. If it's just 6 or somewhere in the middle, and there are industry ratios of how much should be your defect leakages and so on. As long as you're adhering to some of those percentage, preferably in single digits, you always want to be in single digits there, then you are meeting the needs. But that is how you do it. As I said, it's as much a science, as much an art to say that, from a time to market and in terms of when to release and how to release, it's a little bit of a combination of both. But you do your best to make sure that when it comes out, it's meeting the standards and the goals that you had in mind.
Thank you, sir. So we have another question from Himanshu. So if you could answer that. Himanshu, you can go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks, Shisham. Sir, my question is primarily related to what Apoorv asked you regarding product pricing. So you talked about primarily basing pricing on the value that you add. But in addition to that, sir, how much role does a company profiling plays? Because often when we are developing pricing for a company, we also look at the business portfolio of the company. So should pricing be based on how much the user can pay? And another aspect I really wanted you to touch about in terms of pricing is a sort of situation where there is captive pricing. Companies trying to get other companies or consumers into their ecosystem and then raising pricing drastically because sort of as a lock-in. So yeah.
No, but both very good points. On the first one, when you look at the profiling, that is where you don't just look at an organization, you look at an industry. And we talked about it a little bit earlier as well, that even while building a product, you look at a little bit of the market segment overall. That where is my product going to play? What is even the market size? If my market size is that there are only 5 players in that market, and they only have just 5 users which are going to use my product, either my product is so good that they're ready to pay thousands, otherwise there's no point in for me to get into that business, right? I mean, if you think about it, if I'm not going to make any money, there's only 5 users, why would I even get there? So the way to answer that question is not to look at the profiling of a company in particular, but an industry in particular, and then identify a little bit of your target segments. And that is where your product, usually speaking, but there are definitely very, very niche products as well, which are created for a very specific user market. But usually, broadly speaking, I would say that you want to create a product which either is appealing to many, many companies in that industry, or also it's appealing to many companies across industries as well. Like, for example, a CRM, which pretty much every single company or larger or mid-sized company, I would say, at least uses it's across industry. But then, of course, there are nuances, like industry-specific nuances. But as an industry CRM or as a product as a CRM, usually you can take it across industries. But if you have to build something which in case of ZS is largely true, because many of our products currently are largely focused to the life sciences industry. There again, you have to look at the profiling of the companies in that industry. And mostly, again speaking, most of those companies can be broken into your SMBs, your mid-tier, and of course, your large tier where your tier 1 and tier 2 sits. So that is where you start a little bit of the profiling, as you're saying, to define and scan that what is the market size, what is the market opportunity, and what is the cut that I expect to get as part of the product. Not aspire to get, but that what I can realistically get. And then based on the product that you have built, you've created, and that's where the value definition comes in, that how much is the value definition and how much does it map with the business definition that we have created, or the market segment that we have created, to map that together to come up with that interlock of the business to then say, yeah, this is the price that I can perhaps sort of create. Now, your second question, of course, was around the captives and so on. So there are 2 ways that I believe you can answer that. Because you also referred to a little bit of the partnership and so on. The way to look at it is when you're creating a partnership on the supply side, which is you're trying to form a competition with, let's say, a vendor or another partner, which is bringing their capabilities together, and together as a whole, you have created something new or something better, which you're now taking to the client. That's being a little bit of the partnership on the supply side. And platforms these days, and if you take examples of Amazon's or Uber, including companies like SFDC and so on. These are all good examples of platforms where they are the provider of the platform itself, but together with many of these vendors, they create a partnership of the supply side where they're supplying all of these products and assets to the end consumer. The other one is, which I think you're also referring to on the captive side, is where you try to partner directly with a client itself to build something for them. Now there, I would just put in a little bit of a caution. And you'll see, I have actually referred to it in one of the next slides, where there's this definition of a charter client. Now, you absolutely want to get your charter clients. But a caution there is, you want to make sure that your charter client doesn't become the only client that you're building the product for. Because if you're only building the product, keeping only that charter client needs, their processes and their asks in mind, then you're delivering a project and not a product, which you can't take outside. So just be a little careful in terms of that. But however, as long as you're doing it in a way that you're keeping the larger industry needs and you're partnering with somebody to create that, and you're creating in a way that you're taking care of their bigger pain points, 100% agree. I mean, that's a great way to create this partnership and so on. And this concept of charter clients or captive clients also, as you refer to them. And then once the product is ready, and you give them, of course, huge discount because they're also taking a lot of risk with you because you're building for them for the first time. You give them heavy discount, sometimes even do it for free, but then you retain the IP rights so that you can create it as a product and sell it to many other clients. I think that is another smart way to get into and trying to create a little bit of a lock-in with your initial few clients, and then sort of expand, and then you continue to increase the prices as your product gets mature, as you have validated it with one client and many clients, over 2 or 3 clients now, to say, hey, I know this is going to work. This is the value add they're getting, and now let me increase the price because now I know that the value being delivered with my product is definitely much higher, and other clients would be ready to pay for it. Did that answer the question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, moving on. So what are the key to success and lessons learned? I think I believe only have one more slide after that, and we can take some more questions as well. So these are some of the key lessons and success criteria, at least the way I define. Now, and these might seem as a little bit of the cliches, but believe me, these are some nuggets that probably I would say I've learned along the years in my own experience in the product world. But again, starting off with the user needs, I know we have repeated the user and business need many a times, and so perhaps one more time. But the idea is that features don't win you business. Addressing pain points do. At the end of the day, you can have thousands of features. People aren't using it. Who cares? Similarly, the experience and the adoption become center stage. If your experience of your product and experience could take different meanings depending on the type of product you are. It doesn't always mean the good UI, which unfortunately oftentimes people get confused by. But if you're building something which is running in the backend and only administrators are going to use it, the user experience is going to be very different compared to something that I'm building, let's say, for a B2C world or perhaps even for B2B. But keep experience and adoption at center stage. If I built the best feature and if my clients are not going to use it, again, I know what's going to happen to my product when the writing is on the wall. So how do you ensure that you pay enough attention on the experience and the adoption? So again, there are multiple concepts like, when you do releases, you do these road shows, webinars, and teach you walkthroughs to your clients, you create FAQ guides. You also, there are a bunch of these softwares which do a lot of this monitoring to say which features, how much time people are spending on every screen and so on. All of that are good examples of how you address those. I know we already talked about speed through some questions, but time to market, charter clients, as we were just talking about, definitely matter. So do leverage what exists, as I referred to earlier. Don't try to build it all. You'll always get opportunity to refine. But stability, quality of service, some of the core elements as part of your, if you have to define the critical path as part of your product, that what is the most critical path that my clients or users are going to take, ensure that they are not full of bugs. Otherwise, why would anybody want to work? So validate, take a little bit of a crawl, walk, run approach, especially if you're starting a new product, which was the intent of this slide. And also if you are a startup, because this matters a lot. Balancing economics and scale, in the long term, both matter. But if you are a startup, you can pick one or the other. So sometimes, as I said, particularly in B2C, scale does matter because you want to have the wider mass. That's how VCs are ready to fund you. And then, of course, you get into sort of making money. The other important one from a business standpoint is don't let KPIs drive you. I know, and that's why I showed just a sampling of those. Sometimes KPIs become the business, and sometimes KPIs oftentimes become the product. Definitely not that what you want, because at the end of the day, you want value creation and product adoption. Tech debt can easily eat your lunch. Now, going back to your earlier question, somebody asked, how do you go about balancing this aspect of features and tech debt or technology gaps, quality? All those are very, very important. But tech debt in particular, and that's what you need a little bit of that architectural thinking, that what I'm building, is it going to sustain at least a year, 2 year, 3 year time frame? If it's not going to sustain even beyond this current product, current project, or just one client, then I have accumulated a lot of tech debt. And there's something wrong in terms of how I build the product. And do accept technology evolution. At IT, I know many of you do have a tech background while you're doing your MBA as well. That technology would continue to evolve. We started with relational database. We got very lucky that stayed for years, no longer anymore. Even in the big data world, the way the changes are coming along, from Hadoops going to the step functions, to the lambdas, microservices, graph analytics, going all the way into newer ways of AI or like tiny AI, edge computing, examples of quantum computing continue to evolve. Identify ways how would you tame those technologies, keeping those business goals that you have for your product in mind. Because technology at the end of the day is going to be an enabler, unless, as I said, with an exception, unless you're building a product which is going to play very, very much in a very specific area in one of these tech spaces. As you mature predominantly, process definitely becomes a very important one, which is the quality of service, the compliance needs, the agile methodologies. They all become very important as you scale. But whether you're big or small, from a people standpoint, people are one of your biggest assets. A great team almost always win. You might not win that particular, battle, but still there will be enough learning to help all of you to win a war, somewhere. But that is what my experience has told me, that there are so many failures along the way, but you shouldn't shy away from failures. Again, you have to have a little bit that intention about fail fast, but also recover faster. You need to have a little bit that agility within how we operate as well. But finding a great team which brings a lot of these skills, that is very agile, that is also very futuristic in terms of its thought process, not in terms of tech skill, which is always continuously learning, which is ready to go the extra mile to kind of put it all together. But a little bit of that team spirit and bringing some of these people with the right skills is very, very important when you're trying to build, particularly a new product. And then lastly, don't get blindsided by things like, oh, what I've built is the best one, which is around innovation. Or, oh, this is what my competition is doing. Let me just do that as well. Then you are copying a competition versus trying to create something unique. So you need to have a little bit of a blend of innovation and competition. You can't do one or the other. Where if you just do what competition is doing, then there is no differentiation. If you're only coming up with innovation and not looking at perhaps what competition might be doing, you are actually not innovating enough. You are definitely missing out on a lot of the points, which should be items you should also be innovating and so on. And sometimes by innovation, I also am referring to just cool new features. There's always opportunity to also enhance what you have. There's always opportunity, and there is nothing wrong in trying to enhance if it is going to help you get to the market better and is going to create sustained competitive advantage for you. And then if you look at also the other blind side I've seen people often running into is the focus only on current customers, where you look at to say, oh, these are my 5 customers that you are currently, and these are all the problems they're talking about. This is the features I'm going to work on. Again, you're not focusing on innovation or the delta, which will take you to newer clients in future. And again, on the same similar aspect, you also don't want to focus only on the prospects, where you kind of look at and say, oh, these are the only clients that I haven't got. Let me only focus on them and see what their pain points are. Let's bring them on. In which case, you sort of sideline your existing clients. Now, you absolutely don't want to do that either. You want to have a healthy mix where you're looking at your prospects. If your current customers, you're bringing in both innovation, looking at what competition is doing. All of those together is what's going to tell you what a nice release of the next version of your product should look like. So again, these are some of the lessons learned along the way, which I felt was very important, especially when you're building a new product. And this is the last slide that I had that I want to leave you guys with a little bit of some food for thought, which is how do you create a little bit of this emotional connect with your customers? And I can't say enough about this aspect that this is going to be a very relevant dimension as we enter this new world, particularly into the B2C, but we are noticing it in B2B as well. That how would you tell the story? You do need to have a convincing way to create that story. What is the USP of your product? What is the purpose of your product? And it becomes very important in a time like now in the COVID situation, where particularly in the life sciences space as well, we are observing where you have a purpose. The purpose is to find drugs which can cure people, especially cure for diseases for which we don't have any solution now. And COVID is a great example. But you do need to find a purpose. It could be social, it could be commercial as well. But how do you tell your story, and how do you create that emotional connect? Concepts of NPS, which is Net Promoter Score, CS, expectation scores, customer experience scores, and so on. These are all good matrices, no question. But the best one I feel is how do you create the right connect? I feel that's the priceless area that we all should focus on. On the right side, I just wanted to kind of give a glimpse. Again, if you're interested, if you can just quickly Google it out. In terms of McKinsey has come up with this framework of sorts in terms of how do you create an emotional bond and the feeling of trust, particularly at a time like COVID, with your user base. And they have a lot of these examples about how do you make it very convenient and ease of use for your users. How do you introduce this concept of safety that people feel safe while using your product? How do you bring in the community aspect, if you can, into all of this? How do you provide help in a very proactive and a pragmatic way versus they having to scramble through a lot of those things and so on? But at the end of the day, the core goal is to create that emotional connect with your end user, to kind of make them feel that, yeah, this is the product I want to buy, even though there are 5-6 options on the table. Why would I go there? And the last thing probably I'll say, and this is an example which literally came just this week, again, both me and my wife, I mean, we have this account for Big Basket, and she was just showing me this recent email that we received where they're talking about a happy friendship day. And before you judge by some of the words written here, I have 2 young boys. So some of the things you would see is remnant of why some of these things are much being ordered. But the concept they're trying to say here with the Happy Friendship Day is these are the products that you're ordering more. Now, not a very novel idea in terms of saying, oh, your most frequently ordered product. Any company which is building e-commerce and where you have an account, you get to see that. But just the way they have narrated the story, it's somewhat connected with me. That, oh, mushrooms are your best friends, because it looks like that is what you're ordering, especially in the times like these, where with 2 young kids, you're offering a lot of these cheese blocks to make pizzas and potatoes to fries and a lot of these cookies and so on. But the goal here is to kind of connect. And something like this did connect with me. When I was reading, it's like, look, they did not just know me or my buying patterns, but they are weaving a story around it. And they are able to narrate it in a very convincing way that creates a little bit of that connect. Now, this is a little bit of a marketing, of course, initiative here, but that just gives you a little bit of a glimpse in terms of what I'm trying to communicate, that you have to create a connect with your product. It could be based on, again, national feelings. It could be based on features. It could be based on the purpose. It could be based on societal good that you're trying to bring in. All of these are great areas, but try to think. Sometimes I feel that is one area which sort of goes discounted. In KPIs and all these plannings, you don't kind of hear about it. So I wanted to dedicate a slide, and probably the last one on this, that create that emotional connect. This is what's going to help you differentiate in the market. Because even if you have even if you have just 5 to start with, just with word to mouth or just these guys being as reference will help you gain many more in future. So that is where probably I would stop. I hope all of this was helpful and you all got to learn a thing or two. So thank you for being such a great and patient audience. And if there are any other further questions, happy to take them now.
Thank you, sir. So we have a question from Anshul. Anshul, you can go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm audible?
Yeah, Anshul, please go ahead.
So I have a question regarding the recent updates and the Javelin product which you had. So, like, what were these changes, and were these changes because of the current situation? And also, I would like to know in general, like, how these updates are driven. Like, are they driven by the current existing custom clients which we have, or are they driven by like new clients which are there? So, how this works is what I want to know.
No, both good questions, Anshul. So I'll break them down into 2. The first part of your question was, and you're using examples of Javelin, that what triggers some of these update and what does it constitute? And the second part was around, like, how do you ensure the clients are adopting, or how do you take it to the clients, both new and existing? So the first part, the way to respond to the question that it depends. That what is the life cycle, the maturity of your product, and why are you even doing sort of a major or a minor upgrade of that evolutionary stage of the product? Now, in our case, Javelin, and some of you are aware, some of you are not, but we have had our Javelin products for over a decade. It's in some areas we have 80, 85, 90% market share because of the value add, of course, that we are able to bring in to our esteemed clients. But what we're observing is that with the changes to, and again, going back to some of the same buckets that I talked about today, looking at industry trends of big data, technology trends, I would say. Looking at the industry trend in life sciences, there's concepts of local healthcare ecosystem. There are concepts of like, you know, your newer waves where you're looking at multi-role kind of sales planning and so on versus just SCP to rep. But to keep it very generic, a lot of these industry changes, technology changes are also giving, and competitive pressure as well, are also telling us that, hey, it's time to look at Javelin in a fresh way, so that it's built for the future versus bringing in a lot of the older thing, which has served us very, very well so far. Even now, it's a very robust platform. But the goal is, how do you create it for the future? So that is one dimension, at least in the case of Javelin, we took that. But typically speaking, what companies look at is, are there big industry changes? Are there big compliance or government regulatory changes? Are there big competitive pressure which has emerged in the industry? Are there big technological changes which would allow me to do the same thing in a much cheaper way, much faster way, and take the value add to the client? Those are the few of the things we kind of typically look at. Or there are also applications like, has my product acquired so much of tech debt that it might be better to rewrite it than trying to add a few more band-aids on top of it or make changes on top of it. All those are sort of factors and dimensions that you kind of look at together to come to a decision that, yeah, it makes sense to write. But then even after that, there are a lot of stages, like, you know, you do a little bit of again, going back to our previous slides, you do a lot of that validation. You go to the market, you validate that, hey, this is what we're thinking. Is this something you feel that we're on the right track? Is this going to work? Would you guys be interested in buying something like this? You also validate it technically. You validate it with your board if it's a big ticket investment. You validate, hey, this is going to take XYZ $1 million. Then should we even go that venture or not? Or what do we do about it? Where does it fit in your overall portfolio? At least for us, it's a big question because we have multiple product lines. So together with all of those, and again, it depends a lot in terms of the organization and the type of product, type of industry, but all of those are things that you look at to then come to a decision to then say, yeah, it's just going to be a minor upgrade, or it's going to be a major upgrade, or even a complete rewrite. So that's the first part. The second part of your question is, how do you go and take it to clients? So it's you try to appeal to both. And the way you try to appeal is not just to existing clients saying, hey, this is something new we're trying to bring in. Would you guys be interested? And that could be to your existing client, who are having a little bit of a renewal of your product, because every product goes through a renewal license and so on. So you go through around the renewal period and saying, hey, is this something you want to move on to the newer platform? Are you still already happy with it? Because at the end of the day, the goal would be to take all your clients to the newer one eventually, if not on day zero. But some of them would be definitely signing up as your charter client. They would be willing to join hands with you because there's so much of tremendous value add that the product will be offering, and they want to be the initial ones to gain enough competitive advantage even before other clients are ready to pick that up. So you'll always get a few mature and more innovative clients who are thinking on that direction to join hands with you. But many of them would be like, hey, we're in the middle of this, that's okay, you just go ahead, get some more clients. And because we are already in the middle of either the execution process or the user process of the core the license period, and we'll get to it when license renewal period comes in. That's for existing client. In the newer clients, there are two buckets. There are newer clients in the same industry or the tiers that you're looking at, like let's say large clients, where you go in and try to acquire the clients to say, yeah, I know we couldn't get you the last time, or maybe perhaps the reasons why you did not want to just try the last time. Now we have gotten something new. Would you be interested? But then there's other ones which you are trying to go in other industry segments. Like for us, SMB is a big area that we are trying to target with some of these offerings, because again, the larger clients already trust us. We have built that trust over 30, 35 years. But with the SMBs coming in such a huge numbers, we're saying how can our products can also be used by many of these smaller companies. So that's just an example of companies not in the same tiers that you're targeting before, or perhaps in other industries as well, that you might want to target as new prospects, because with the newer features and the flexibility that you're bringing in with the products. Does that help, Anshul?
Yes, sir, definitely, sir.
Very nice.
Thank you, sir. We have another question from Achal. So Achal, you can go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Rishabh. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, go on, Achal.
Sir, my question is related to the product ideation and launch process. So I think one of the steps that can be included in that is prototyping, because like I've read in many articles that prototyping is one of the important steps in a new product development process. So I would like to ask that is product development for software does not require a prototyping step, or just like someone asked in the YouTube, is the product launched and then incrementally, it is improvised real time?
Yeah, no, very good point, Achal. So we do have a dedicated rapid prototyping team as well. So that definitely answers the question. But 100% yes. We were not calling it as a prototype formally, but perhaps maybe I can pass that note to the team. But within your exploratory, define and validate, you absolutely have a use case to leverage prototype. In the explore stage in particular, and when we say prototype, at least internally, there are two types of prototype we often refer to. One which we refer to as a concept prototype, where you just created more like wireframes, more like napkin sketches, which is just to validate the idea itself. But then there are also prototypes which we call as functional prototype. These are some pieces working prototype as well. It's not working as a production grade system, but some pieces working so that you convey the interactions, the interconnectivity as well, and so on. So we try to refer to both of those typically during explore and define, and sometimes a little bit in the validate as well, perhaps just by elevating the level of prototype to say, hey, is this going to work or not? But during exploration stage, 100%. And as I said, thank you for sharing up early. I'll go back to the team and request them to add the word prototype. But 100% we do recommend to use prototype. The only caution I would make is more towards the concept ones before you jump into functional, because that allows you to do much rapid iterations versus the functional.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. We'll just take the last two questions. So Naveen has a question. Naveen, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Rishabh. Am I audible?
Yes, Naveen. Yeah.
Hello, sir. Sir, my question is related to the innovation and adoption part, which you have mentioned in the development phase. So my question is from last 3 to 4 years, many IT consulting firms, many software firms were working on a lot of proof of concepts, were working on a lot of demos in the field of newer technologies, for example, AI or the quantum computing you mentioned, or blockchain or IoT. So there were a lot of companies that focused on creating a lot of POCs and demos for that. But because of the current scenario, we are seeing two major problems. One, we are not able to bring people in office. We are not able to use our resources in a maximized manner. Second, many clients, as we studied through many case studies, many clients are being reluctant in using these newer technologies. So my question is, what kind of impact these two situations is creating over the current focus of many consulting firms over using newer technologies? And what impact it is bringing to the research and development department of any organization, or let's say ZS Associate?
It's a very loaded question, but the way I would respond to that, Naveen, is that we might have seen a little bit of a slowdown especially during the early parts of COVID. But we are very fortunate to be in that software and the tech, which includes the audience here as well, as we're talking on this software product topic. That things are definitely changing. And a good testament of that is if I go back to my second slide, a good testament to that is the rising stocks of Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. If you look at it, they're continuing to rise. So the way I would respond to that is, particularly just from a software product standpoint, I would call it a little bit of a hiccup versus a big slowdown, because it's the technology which would help us elevate through some of those challenges, like work from home. If you look at the adoption of tools like Zoom, which we are using right now, or even tools like Teams and so on, the usage has grown rapidly, dramatically, exponentially, whichever phrase you want to call it. And all of those are software products, for example. However, there have been industries, and I was just there at a CII event yesterday, talking about digital transformation and digitization for the future. So it's a topic very, very close to my heart right now, because I just talked about it, where I gave examples of mining industry, gave examples of manufacturing industry, of transportation industry, how companies like that are adopting technology right now. Now, many of those, as I said, is a little bit of a hiccup because of the cash flow from an R&D standpoint. They might have put things on hold. But on the same vein, companies like the tech companies or companies which are building software product, they know that as and when that crunch is a little bit over, all these companies would be ready to buy all these software product. So for the R&D groups, and that's what you see, all these Facebook, Google, and all that, the stocks continue to rise and rise and rise, because all the software companies are in that incubation phase to say, oh, given the COVID, how is the industry changing? So that as and when it comes out and these companies open the purses, immediately the thing's going to start moving. Having said that, Companies like if you which are early adopters of digital, if you take insurance, if you take somewhat banking as well, or financial services for that matter, if you take companies on the high tech side, all these companies are looking at even better ways to adopt digital transformation and so on. I'll just give you a metric. As I said, it's fresh in my mind. Cisco and IDC, they just did a research which they launched, I believe, just this week, early this week. They have quoted close to about $256 billion, if I'm not wrong, is the uplift by 2024 if the SMBs in India adopt the digitization and go the digital transformation way. Imagine in just three and a half years, we're talking about contribution of this high a number. I think it's $256 billion, I believe, or some number closer to that, contribution to the India's GDP. So of course, there is a little bit of a hiccup right now for some companies, I would say, but the writing is again on the wall that we all will be very soon getting into this again hyper growth period, very well enabled by product, software, and technology.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for that.
Thank you, sir. So we have one last question from Prakhar. So Prakhar, you can go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, sir. Sir, I have two questions. First is like, what percentage do the hackathons and challenges posted by ZS helps toward contributing like in understanding new technologies and ideas? And the second one is that I was going through one of our articles about Revo, and there are saw a term algorithm as a service. If you could shed some light on it, because I couldn't.
Sure. Yeah. So I just wrote a case study, by the way, on Revo Algo as a service on AWS. If you're interested, I would recommend, please go and take a look. And there, interestingly, I also referred to Quest, which is our innovation hackathon. So it's a great example. So thanks for bringing it up. But do read that AWS case study. You can just write AWS and ZS, and you get that. But coming back to your early question in terms of what role innovation and so on plays, hackathons and innovation initiatives like these are a very critical segment of how you build products, services in the modern world, not just as ZS, but the industry in general as well. We have multiple forums that we use at ZS, and we are very fortunate that the organizational leadership supports many of those initiatives. Our Quest is our flagship event. Again, that's what I've referred to in that AWS article I was referring to, which is a pan-India and also pan-ZS now, I would say, is a hackathon where because we have participants globally as well who come and join, where we bring in ideas which are both top-down, where some of our business area leaders recommend problems, but also bottom-up. We let teams come up with their own ideas, of course, which are relevant to ZS, and that's how we let the topmost ideas to kind of bubble up. But so that is one good one. But there are other initiatives like as well. We have something which we call as a Shark Tank as well, where a lot of these ideas we define and we give them some kind of funding to take it to the next level. There are also hackathon like we run for our data science team, which is a global hackathon, which is open to wider communities as well, where we ask our data scientists to come and solve some specific problem. And the benefit they get is, as part of that, of course, they get some prizes as well. But along with that, they get direct entry into getting interviews and bypassing the round one, because now we know they have proved themselves as part of the hackathon. We also do a bunch of these hackathon as part of the industry events, there was this machine learning data scientist MLDS conference organized by Analytical India magazine in Bangalore. So there we sponsored a hackathon where the participants were solving a specific problem. There are a bunch of these team-based initiatives as well, which are team hackathon. There are some which we do in partnership with our clients as well. So at ZS, definitely innovation and grassroots innovations in a way is a big enabler in terms of the asset services that we try to come up with. And then even at the top level, when we go in at we have this partner summit that we run every year. There also we have something which we call as Idea Summit, Idea Launchpad, where many of these ideas are vetted, discussed, and then some of them make through, and some of them, of course, we keep it on hold perhaps for future. But the idea is to do innovation through concepts like hackathon, group thinking, and many other of these group initiatives at every level.
And so a little bit brief about what is algorithm as a service.
Yeah, sorry. So Algo as a service is a new offering that we have added under our Revo product line. And essentially the idea there, Prakhar, is that you take your models that you have built in, either written in R or Python or or Java and so on. How do you create an API layer on top of it? So that now you don't have to worry about like, how I'm going to host it, how I'm going to call it, how I'm going to train it. All of that is taken care of by the engine that we have built. And these models could be used from anywhere. Because it's an API, can a client which is using something very proprietary with the ecosystem, can they just make a call, get it? Answer is yes. If they're using it hosted, like a SaaS application on the cloud, or like a public cloud, can they make a call to the API? The answer is yes. Is there something hosted within ZS? We do a lot of managed services work as well. Can that be used to call on these APIs? The answer is yes. But the goal here is how do we democratize this access and introduce this concept of algorithm as a service to make sure that the adoption of these models, and we do create a lot of these models with our advanced data science team and our machine learning engineering team and so on, to make sure that our clients are able to adopt these innovations rapidly to gain competitive advantage for and creating their new products much quicker.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I think that was the last question that we had from our audience. So we would be kindly wrapping up the session now. So I would like to thank you for being with us, sparing your time and giving us this session. It has given us a lot of food for thoughts and was indeed an insightful and comprehensive session that would act as a guiding light for us in this cryptic world of products. Moreover, the learnings from this webinar would definitely add more tools to our arsenals in our endeavors to be industry ready. So thanks a lot. Thanks for being with us, sir.
Thank you, Shravan, and thanks for the warm welcome and the opportunity to present. I wish you all the very best in your future and your careers as well. And please do stay healthy during these COVID times. Thank you, one and all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank